When I got a little older, I really didn't like my father because everything that transpired in my life. I was probably about 15, 16. That following morning, my father got up. He just was in his mood. He was drinking and he just got in my face. I went to get a knife. My father was still in my face. All this just kind of hate just went through me. Something just clicked in me. I was going to basically stab my father. My name is Ron Sukan Jr., and this is my Easter story. When I was a young age, my father and my mother got divorced. And in a sense, my father took me from my mom. And then what happened was that when we moved to California, once we moved here, my dad never held a job for very long. And we were bouncing from shelter to rented rooms to sleeping in rest stops. Anywhere we can sleep or lay our head down, that's where my dad would end up putting us at. And it was all through that when I was young. I never really stayed in any schools for very long and made friends because I always knew that we were end up moving somewhere. When I was growing up, my father was pretty abusive, verbally and physically. He would talk down to me and, basically I was nothing. And then it was a physical abuse. I remember one incident when I was younger. It was a weekend, and my dad just got back from drinking, and my dad rented this room for a couple months from this lady. He came home drunk, and I was already home, and we would share a bed together. He fell asleep, and I was sleeping right next to him, and I was tossing and turning, and something just went off on him, and he literally kicked me to the ground and started punching me, and I'd never forget that night. That was one night that I just knew it was tough. And I remember my dad just, physically abused me he'd always beat me with a belt and chase after me. And the thing was that he would do it around family members, and no one really ever stood up for me or anything. They just looked at me and said, that's just big Ron, taking care of little Ron. And it was like that. It was always been like that when I was growing up. And it was really tough. I remember one instance also that when I got a little older, I really didn't like my father because everything that transpired in my life. And my dad, he just, he kind of didn't get it. And my dad didn't have a lot of lady friends. And what happened was that he would always blame me because he couldn't have any girlfriends or anything like that. He would always put that blame on to me. And it was tough because my dad never really had a really good relationship. But the ones that he did have, I noticed him talking the same way to them as he was talking to me, very abusively and just kind of just getting in their heads and just messing with them. And just seeing how my father treated women was really tough. And for a while, that's what my mindset was. Because remember, my father was the only role model that I had. And that's what I kind of viewed myself and how to treat women. And it is totally wrong. But my father bred that into my head. And it was really, really tough to get over that. Later on in life, my father was really, really heavy in pornography. And I remember not knowing what it was at first, but seeing all the stuff in my father's room. And after a while, I started kind of getting into that stuff. And I remember it was a couple of years, I was really kind of addicted. It was really a struggle to deal with. It was really tough. It's not something you can go to your father or something you want to talk about to anybody. It's kind of embarrassing. And I know it was a really struggle for me. And until I realized, this stuff's gonna kill me, and I can't be doing this stuff. And it was really addicting. And I remember when the tail end of that started digressing, I started going to church. And I remember in school when I was a young kid, there's this guy, his name is Ben, and he was, I was kind of fairly new to the school, and he invited me to church. And I thought, okay, cool, let's go check out church and see how it is. And I've kind of been in and out of church when I was little because my dad would always go to churches and ask for money, but we would never really stay in the church. And I remember him asking me, and I was like, okay, I really had nothing else to do. And we went to church, and right when I walked in those doors, I knew something was different. I knew this is different. And I remember getting a handshake from the pastor there, and he gave me a hug out of nowhere. My father was not very affectionate to me, and just getting a hug by somebody was amazing. And I remember him hugging me, and he looking at me, and he told me things are going to change. And he didn't know my situation or anything. And I remember when I going in there and sitting in the pew kind of towards the back, because that's where everybody sits when they first go to church. And I remember sitting back there and him preaching the word, and the youth pastor was there. He was kind of sitting in the front, and there was some youth there. And I remember him preaching, and just towards the end there was an altar call. And at that moment, I wanted to change. Something wasn't right. Things weren't going right. This other way I was taking wasn't going anywhere. And when I went to the altar and I gave my life to Christ, my pastor hugged me, or the pastor at the time hugged me. And I remember him saying that things are going to change. And that just kept going in my mind. And I remember I went home that night, and my dad wasn't there. He was gone. And I remember going to bed there, and I remember looking, and I actually prayed. I didn't know how to pray, but I was just talking to God, and that just kept going in my mind that things were going to change. And the following day, I got up really excited and ready to go to school, and it was amazing that everything was lifted off of me. It just took one time for me to go to church and get this all off my chest, and it was awesome that God worked. And I remember going to school the next day just excited and charged up, and I was talking to my friend Ben, and he was really excited I started coming to church. And after that, everything kind of fell into place towards what God wanted in my life. And I remember praying in a couple services in the youth group. I really didn't want to be like my father. I didn't want to go through I don't want to treat with anybody with abuse, and I didn't want to be treated with abuse. And I didn't want that anymore. And I remember a couple weeks I came to youth group, and I was talking to the pastor, and I was praying, and it was altar call again. And I said, God, I know you have something for me. I know this isn't just it. And the pastor just came, prayed with me, and a couple of the kids just put their hands on me. And it was a relief that God had a plan for me. And I went home that night. The following morning, my father got up, and he just was in his mood. He was drinking, and he just got in my face. And then at that moment, I didn't want to take it anymore. And I went to get a knife, and my father was still in my face, and something just clicked in me. I was going to basically stab my father. And I remember our neighbor came in, and she kind of broke everything up and called the cops and all that. And, it just, at that moment, I didn't want to live that life anymore. I didn't want to see my dad anymore. I just didn't want to be there anymore. My dad told me that he's going to be leaving, and that he doesn't want to be here anymore, and that he's going to be moving to South Dakota. And, here I am, just a kid, 16 years old, living with my father, and my dad's going to just get up and leave me. And I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do. And the following night was church. Little behold, the youth pastor's mom was there, and so she's always helped young men. And so I was talking to her, and then she offered me a place at her house to go ahead and live. So I was kind of skeptic. I don't know. I've only been going here for maybe a year and a half, and all this stuff started happening. And then out of nowhere, this nice lady asked me if I can go over there and hang out and be part of their family. Well, I jumped at the chance. I said sure. And so I lived with them for about a year, and in that whole year, being part of a family I've never experienced before, because I never really had a family. It was just me and my dad. And in that 1 year I spent with that family, changed my whole view of having a mom, of having a father there to talk to me just family going out together and eating. And it gave me a sense of what a family really is. And and that was a big step for me in growing up as a Christian, as a man, as now a father. God was pointing me in a way that I needed to go, and He was supplying footsteps for me where I was supposed to be going. And I remember being part of that family and just them accepting me. And it's been a total blessing that they've always been part of my life. And it just changed my life. If it wasn't for me probably being open and going to church and accepting my friend's invite, I probably wouldn't be here right now. And it just testifies that how powerful God is, and He has a plan for you. My name is Ron Sukan Jr., and God changed my life.